Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Weapons Expanded Bioferrite. For starters, you'll need to own the Anomaly DLC, as well as the additional workshop content, Vanilla Expanded Framework, and Harmony. Whilst not required, this mod does have integrations with Factions Expanded Pirates and Weapons Expanded Heavy.
Previously on the Rimworld mod rundown.
And that is all of it. The entire Vanilla Weapons Expanded series has now been covered. A little more Bioferrite weaponry never hurt anybody. Wait, with this mod and its integrations, you're potentially getting 6 additions to your Anomaly arsenal, all unlocked via the standard Anomaly research project of Bioferrite weaponry. So no additional study is required to get these in your list of potential choices. First things first, the artwork for these weapons is really cool, especially the War Bolter. There's a lot of detailing that you're going to need something like Camera Plus to really get the full benefit from. First up, we have the Flare Strike Rifle. The clear and obvious comparison is going to be something like a Hellcat. They share the same cost and work to make, but the stats shift around a little bit and the active changes quite significantly. The Flare Strike performs better at a medium to long distance, with a higher range to support that and a smaller burst of only 2 shots, that deal 1 more damage per round than a Hellcat. The aiming time and cooldown are also slightly jiggled, but it results in the same firing cycle. The Hellcat's shorter range and higher accuracy at closer distances makes sense given its active, the underbarrel flamethrower. The Flare Strike swaps that out for an integrated disruptor flare launcher. These flares cost as much to refuel as the belt utility item, 5 per launch, with the only downside being that compared to the pack, the rifle only stores 4 uses, 2 less than a dedicated flare belt. Honestly, that's entirely fine. A couple of shooters using these will give you more than enough flares to lock down targets, and you won't be sacrificing your utility slot for that functionality, allowing you to make better use of more interesting belts. Just remember to treat flares with caution, as they can hit friend and foe alike.
This ain't one of your church picnic flare gun firing splanders. This is the real thing. Don't!
The Firestorm shotgun is up next. Let's compare it to a pump shotgun, as it has the same work amount and costs the same amount of steel and components. It just adds a little extra Bioferrite for the active. The Firestorm is sacrificing a couple of points of damage and range for its active ability, maintaining the same accuracy and timings as a pump shotty. Its active is incredibly short range, reaching just 4 tiles out from the pawn, spreading to a 5 wide arc at the end of this point. You need to be pretty Johnny on the spot while using the active to avoid getting tangled up in melee from approaching attackers. Although, as this has a very narrow field of fire to begin with, you can thread the needle between frontline fighters to provide a little bit of toasty assistance against their attackers. Holding a maximum of 4 rounds of this Dragon's Breath and costing a mere 5 Bioferrite to refuel each charge, this is an easily affordable active should things get a little bit too close for comfort. Now we have the Cyclone Minigun. Again, this will cost the same amount of steel, components, and work to make as a normal version of a minigun, but it also needs a touch of Bioferrite. This is going to make it heavier to carry with an additional 2 kg of weight. Fortunately, this adds no additional impact on that move speed penalty, it's the same as a normal minigun. Stat wise, the only difference to the Cyclone is a 1 to 3% hit chance reduction across the board on its accuracy values. So now your 25% at medium is only 24. The horror. The upside to the Cyclone is that it has 2 uses of an ability called Rapid Burst, that chews through 10 Bioferrite per use. It doubles the firing rate for that burst of shots, meaning you'll be able to move a little sooner, or potentially line up another shot quicker if needed. Useful if you need to use someone to lay down a blanket of suppressing fire, but don't want them to overstay their welcome whilst pulling the trigger. Just be careful about using this indoors, as you will wreck your own walls in no time.
Full auto in buildings, bro.
I'm not full auto, it's not full auto.
That's not full auto?
This is. That's full auto.
Damn, bro. Okay.
The Piercer rifle is the only weapon to come in without an active ability. It's a pretty easy comparison to a bolt action rifle, needing a little bit more work and time and costing that extra touch of Bioferrite, as per usual. The stats across the board are almost identical, except for range, as strapping a great shard of Bioferrite underneath the barrel has made it a bit harder to reliably line up a shot on a very distant target. That shard of Bioferrite does have its uses however, changing the melee DPS of the rifle from 4.5 to 7.04, with better penetration to boot. You are now able to stab and cut with the bayonet, as well as club a melee attacker with the stock, compared to the pure blunt profile of using a bolt action rifle. The obvious question is, why the hell are you getting into melee range with a bolt action rifle? If you're using heavy weapons, you'll have access to the heavy incinerator. Its point of comparison is going to be a mix of a standard incinerator and a heavy flamer, also from heavy weapons. Both heavy weapon burners have 10 shots before they'll break, which makes it somewhat tricky to utilise the active ability on the heavy incinerator, as it costs 5% durability rather than the normal 10%, so you'll need to refuel it at least once to use this twice, and get the most value out of the heavy weapon's limited durability. This vaporizer ability has significantly lower range than a normal blast from the weapon, with seemingly similar damage, both hitting as standard for 10, so it often works better just sticking with the standard shots for better range and a larger burst count of projectiles. The heavy incinerator is also really expensive, costing 20 additional steel and 6 more components than a heavy flamer, or 25 steel and 2 components more than the standard incinerator. Weirdly, it weighs practically nothing compared to a normal heavy weapon though, at only 3.4 kg. This is also reflected in the heavy incinerator not coming with a move speed penalty, although it does still require an exo frame or the tough trait to use. Compared side by side with the flamer, the old school heavy weapon barfs out a huge cone of fire in a pretty straightforward direction, whereas the incinerators both lay down blankets of napalm instead, with a central line that deals damage more reliably compared to the outer splash radius. The heavy version of the incinerator just takes a little bit longer to aim but can reach 7 tiles further, making it much easier to keep enemies at bay. This weapon is left in a bit of a funny spot, as 10 uses is far too limited to justify building this over a bog standard incinerator, and the heavy flamer technically hits more tiles and costs less to make. Maybe if you're using mending benches you can find a good spot in your lineup for this, because every colony needs itself a doof warrior. Finally, you've got the War Bolter, weirdly the only weapon of its type that doesn't use the War Casket prefix in its name. At least it makes it really easy to find when building it though. The War Bolter is in a league of its own in terms of cost and power, so here we go. 320 steel, 20 plasteel, 20 bioferrite and 12 components will get you this, compared to the quote unquote standard War Casket auto rifle, which is just 175 steel, 20 plasteel and 3 components. So what are we paying all this extra for? More damage, more range, bonus impact against structures, a better accuracy at anything that isn't close, a longer aiming time and cooldown, and the small part where the War Bolter fires explosive rounds that hit in a 3x3 radius. This thing is nuts. It even has a pretty solid direct hit chance too, with a negligible miss radius, and for its active, it behaves just like an incinerator, at the same range that the gun can actually shoot, allowing you to spray a wave of fire at anything 35 tiles away. Fantastic for igniting siege attackers, cooking bugs, or scattering the enemy ranged line if they're trying to get off cheeky shots. As always, War Casket weapons are always shown a lot of love and are intentionally overpowered. This wouldn't be a video made by me if this information wasn't somehow immediately made invalid though, right? So at time of recording, the Firestorm shotgun and the War Bolter cannot be reloaded. There isn't an option in any right click menus, and with dev mode enabled the option to reload to full is missing. So let's see if a patch for this lands in a few hours, fixing that bug, changing some of the weapon stats around and making this whole rundown incorrect, just for shits and giggles. Thanks for watching folks. If you have any mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.